Hola, todo mundo. Me llamo Alex y bienvenidos a mi cuenta de YouTube. Hi everyone, my name is Alex and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Hoy vamos a aprender sobre el subjuntivo en el español. Today we'll be learning the subjunctive tense in Spanish. This is a very complicated idea to get your head around, so this might be quite a long video. But hopefully by the end you will understand how and when and why we use the subjunctive tense in Spanish. Entonces, el subjuntivo is a mood tense in Spanish. And you might be thinking, Alex, what is a mood tense? I've never heard of that before. So in Spanish, we have indicative verbs, and these are verbs that are concrete actions, it's reality, it's certainty, it's the truth. And the subjunctive, the mood tense, basically depends on context. It depends on possibility. We can use it when we're talking about desires and wants, our hopes and wishes. And it also is used when there is doubt and uncertainty. So instead of a concrete indicative verb, the subjunctive is more doubtful, uncertain, it's all about possibilities. So it's got a bit more like a mood feel, depending on the mood and the context of a sentence. So an example in Spanish of the two. So indicative, we have Estoy seguro, I am sure, so that's certain, I am sure, que ella habla español, that she speaks Spanish. I am sure that she speaks Spanish. There is no doubt, no uncertainty, no possibility that she doesn't speak it. I know, estoy seguro que ella habla español. Whereas when we use a subjunctive, we have to use a phrase that shows some doubt, some uncertainty, some possibility. So we will use es posible que. This means it is likely that. Again, it's not certain, it's likely, but it's not 100% certain, it's not 100% true. So then we have to use a subjunctive with the verb that follows. So es posible que ella hable español. The next part of this video will go into the endings and how to form a subjunctive. But I just wanted to say that the subjunctive does exist in English. It is hugely less common than in Spanish, and when we use it, we don't tend to notice it. I'll give you a little example. So, with the indicative in English, it's like I say in Spanish, it's reality, it's happened. So we can say, when I was in your position, I called the police. So you're saying that I was in a position the same as you were in, and I called the police. It happened, it's real, it's truthful. But the subjunctive way of saying this is if I were in your position, I would call the police. There's a bit more uncertainty there. It's not concrete that I was in the same position as you. So that is when we use subjunctive in English. Because we speak English as our mother tongue and we don't necessarily think about these things, it just comes naturally to us. So it's super, super important when learning subjunctive in Spanish that we are able to identify when to use it, because it is a lot more common. Ahora voy a hablar sobre cómo el subjuntivo funciona. I'm going to talk about how the subjunctive functions and how we form it. So the two most common uses of the subjunctive are in the present tense and in the past imperfect tense. In this section of the video, I'll be talking about el subjuntivo presente, the present subjunctive, and I will go into talk about the imperfecto de subjuntivo a little bit later. So to form the present subjunctive, we take the yo conjugation of a verb, so the I conjugation of the verb. We take off the O, and then we have the stem. So for example, the verb hablar, the I present form is hablo, and we take the O off, so we have habl. We have habl without the O, and that is the stem in which we then add the subjunctive endings on. If we use the IR verb vivir, I live is vivo, and we take the O off, so the subjunctive stem is vive. And again, an ER verb, comer, we make it into the I conjugation, which is como, take the O off, and then the subjunctive stem is com. So I will put on either side of me the AR subjunctive endings in the present tense and the IR and ER subjunctive endings in present tense, because they are different. And if we look carefully, we can identify that in the present subjunctive, when we put in the endings on, they are actually the flip of each other. So in normal present tense, these IR and ER endings will be the endings for the AR verbs and vice versa. But in the subjunctive tense, they switch. If that has confused you, that is fine. Just remember that these are the endings for subjunctive verbs in the present tense. Like I said before, the subjunctive is a mood tense, so it is context dependent on the sentence and also just the context of the entire situation. But thankfully, there is an acronym that we can use to help us identify when we should use the subjunctive tense. This acronym is WEIRDO, and I will go through what each of the letters in WEIRDO stands for with a couple of examples of when we can use subjunctive tense. Just a little forewarning, these phrases that I'm going to put into the WEIRDO acronym are trigger phrases, which means the phrases themselves don't need the subjunctive, but it's the verb that comes after these phrases that need to be changed into the subjunctive. And this is because when we use a subjunctive, what tends to happen is the first part of the phrase, the trigger phrase that falls under this WEIRDO category, is in one person. So normally I or you or he, she, it, and then it is the verb afterwards, the subject changes, and then that's the verb that then becomes subjunctive because it's different from the like trigger phrase and verb before, so that means that needs to change. The W in WEIRDO stands for want, wishes and desires. So it can be used in situations where you want something in the future, you wish for something to happen, you have a desire, and some trigger phrases, remember these do not become the subjunctive verb, it is the verb that follows these phrases, but some trigger phrases for want, wishes and desires are ojalá que, esperar que, both meaning I hope that, desear que, which means to wish that, and querer que, which means to want that. And remember, the verb that comes after that becomes subjunctive, so we can say espero que, I hope that, estés bien. If it was indicative, it would be espero que estás bien, because we know that is the present tense endings or the present tense you ending of estar, but because it is a subjunctive, we need to change that ending to espero que estés bien. E in the acronym WEIRDO stands for emotion, so this is when we can use a subjunctive about the way things make us feel. Some trigger phrases for this can be alegrarse, sentir, sorprenderse. An example that I'm going to use is me sorprende que, it surprises me that, seas muy alto, that you are really tall. It surprises me that you're really tall. And the subjunctive in this is not the trigger phrase itself, but the verb after. Sea is the subjunctive for ser, because in the indicative, ser becomes es, but because it's subjunctive and the change in the way the verb is conjugated, it becomes me sorprende que seas muy alto. I in WEIRDO stands for impersonal expressions, and these are expressions that we can use in sentences when describing things, and a few examples of these are es importante que, it's important that, es necesario que, it's necessary that, and then what follows after that trigger phrase, the verb afterwards turns into the subjunctive. So the R in WEIRDO stands for request, so we can use the subjunctive when we are requesting someone to do something. A few trigger phrases of this could be pedir que, insistir en, proponer que. An example I'm going to use is insisto en, I insist that, me hagas cena, that you make me dinner. We took the verb hacer and we put it in the first person present conjugation, which is hago, and then we took the o off and added the u subjunctive endings for er verbs, so we get hagas. D in WEIRDO stands for doubt and denial, so like I was saying before, the subjunctive, we tend to use it when there's a bit of doubt and uncertainty there. A few phrases that we can use for doubt and denial is dudar que, no creer que, negar que, and this triggers the subjunctive because there's an element of doubt, an element of denial and uncertainty. And finally, the O in WEIRDO stands for orders or imperatives. I'll be going into this in another video because there are a number of different rules and explanations for this, but just it's important to know that when you are giving an order or using an imperative, we have to use the subjunctive. As I've mentioned before, it is super important to remember that the verb after the trigger phrase becomes a subjunctive, not the verb in the trigger phrase itself.